Okay guys, just wanted to take a little bit of time today to shoot this quick video for you, going over one of the most common questions that I get, especially my DMs, and that is the question of, should I go and start off with my agency or should I go and become a trader? Now, I get this question a lot, probably a few times a week, and especially from a lot of you who are either just starting off as a beginning entrepreneur and you don't know which financial vehicle to get started with to build up some cash flow or to potentially take this through the long term. Or for a lot of people that are sort of jaded, maybe you've lost your passion in one or the other. You're not necessarily dealing with shiny object syndrome because you're probably past that stage, but you've been so invested that you start to realize after the initial money making phase, getting yourself off the ground, you start to realize that you're just maybe not passionate about whatever space you're in. Okay, so in today's video, although it is anecdotal, I've tried to make it as objective as possible. And sure, a lot of this is based on my own experience. So, I can't help it if some of these points are kind of subjective. But again, I've tried to make this as factual as possible, as unbiased as possible. And hopefully, although this video is from my own perspective, it can help you in making your decision as well. So let's get straight into things. First financial vehicle I'm going to get started with is just the agency model. Now, this doesn't have to be a social media marketing agency. This doesn't even have to be any sort of advertising agency, although I do run one. This can be anything from graphic design agency to content creation to maybe even a sales training agency. Can be anything. Okay, so starting straight off, the first pro that I see is just a diversity in service offerings. So again, as I just mentioned, it could be graphic design, sales training, it could be paid traffic, could be SEO, could be general social media management. There's so many different, it could be even PR, right? There's so many different services you could offer to your clients. And at any point in time, it's pretty easy to pivot or add or subtract from your service list, okay? So that's one, is just the flexibility of running an agency, especially once you start to get your reputation up. Second point is that there's dozens, if not hundreds of different niches and industries, okay? So if you feel, for example, that you've been working with restaurants for a long time and maybe you've gotten to the point where you have 5 to 10 clients, you're starting to hit points of scale, and like me, you realize that the current niche just isn't something you're passionate about, and it isn't something that makes you want to get out of bed in the morning. It isn't something that you think you can carry on long term with you for what you do for a living, right? Again, it's also very easy, like the service offerings, to pivot to completely change industries, because you can pretty much keep the services the same if they're applicable to the other industry. You just have to learn some of the niche terminology, right? You just have to learn how those businesses work. After you get that process down, it's very easy to transition, especially if you have a genuine passion for the new industry or the new niche you want to get into. And, that's also coupled with just the sheer amount of options you have, right? So, there's local businesses alone. There's restaurants, dentists, doctors, chiropractors, plumbers, real estate agents, so many different niches you can get into. Same thing with the online space, right? Maybe you want to work with influencers and coaches. Maybe you want to work with, e-commerce businesses. Maybe you want to work with startups, SaaS businesses. So many different spaces you can get into, and you'll never really run out of options, especially if you're looking to make some sort of pivot. So that leads me on to the next point, which is that it's not really capital intensive at all to get started. You don't need to have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars in seed funding to get started, right? You're not really necessarily in the startup environment. You're just offering a service to clients. So literally all you need is maybe a couple $100 to $1,000 for a good educational program that'll get you through the basics of how to start your agency, how to get it up and running and get clients and, establish your team or learner service. That's really all you need. And then maybe there's a few software costs here and there. If you are working under my specific agency model that I teach, you also don't have any employees under payroll when you first start, okay? So you work with contractors, you build your team with freelancers, and you pay them usually at the end of the month, okay? So there's really no overhead and there's really no risk until you actually sign on clients, because if you do it right, you're going to be paying those freelancers on a project by project basis. And again, you don't really have to have too much skin in the game when it comes to this. Next point is that if your offering is paid traffic based, there's not much of a ceiling in monthly payments from clients either. So if you go, especially for the e-commerce space more so, you can work out percentage of sales deals, right? So, a client can be paying you a straight up retainer of say 4K a month, but if you have a percentage deal, percentage of ad spend, percentage of sales, percentage of net ROAS, that can easily go to, instead of just that flat 4K retainer, if you take 10% of sales and 1 month you make 100K for them, you could very well be making an extra 10K in commissions, right? There's really not much of a ceiling in monthly payments. Retainers can range from $1,000 to 10K plus. Again, there's really no limit as far as how big of clients you can get, okay? Next point is that you don't have to be an expert at a service before selling it. You simply have to build an expert team you can depend on. So that's one thing that I see a lot of people making a mistake with nowadays, is that they go in, they try to be a one-person team, and they just end up in this endless cycle of trying to build up a portfolio, etc. You don't really have to go that route anymore. Okay. Next thing is that you can also have the potential to work with some of the biggest companies in the world. It's also fast growth, right? So with a solid sales skills and process, defined edge, and a good customer experience, you can go from literally zero to 10K per month fairly quickly. If you have a client sign on for an average of $2,000 a month, which is fairly common in this space, all you need is 5 clients to get to over a 6-figure income. Okay. And that also leads me to my second point, or my next point, which is multiple streams of income. So you can have done for you services. You can also do consulting for clients. You can also coach other people on how to start their own agencies. And you can also launch some sort of course or training program for both students of yours looking to start their own agencies, as well as training for maybe businesses that can't really afford a done for you service. There's so many angles you can take with this, especially once you get good at it. Okay. Last point is that it's hard to lose money unless you pay for bad coaches and courses. So like I said, not really any sort of overhead, doesn't really require that much capital to get started. And like it is for trading, which I'll get into it in a little bit, you don't need to have any sort of fancy marketing degree. You don't really need to, be in your at a certain age. I've had students that are, 15, 16 and have gone on to start successful agencies. So it really doesn't matter, where in life you're coming from. Now, as far as cons go, because I do have to follow this up with the potential cons you'll run into. First con is that there's a lot of talking and building relationships with people. So for an introvert like myself, sometimes it can get draining. And I know a lot of you guys watching this are probably introverts as well. So that's something to keep in mind if you're not very comfortable with donning this sort of like extrovert persona. It can get draining for you at times. And I know it certainly does for me. If I have back-to-back sales calls and then a consulting session one day, that's definitely going to drain me a lot. And I'm going to have a lot more downtime as opposed to someone who's more naturally extroverted, creative type, etc. Okay. Next con is that there is some overhead, especially once you start picking up clients. So as you start getting clients, maybe some of your software costs will go up. Maybe you might start considering expanding your team, etc. So although you can start off with very little overhead, there's certain issues you might run into at scale, especially once you start climbing up above the multi-5 figures a month mark. There's also niche saturation, which is, I think it's an unpopular opinion because a lot of gurus want to tell you that, SMA is not even near saturated. There's so many businesses out there that you could be helping, etc. I agree with that to a certain extent, but that's because they're looking at it at a macro perspective, right? At this point, there's been hundreds of thousands, if not millions of students coming out of these gurus courses trying to start some sort of agency, regardless of whatever niche they're going into. At this point, in most niches, most of these business owners have at least gotten pitched to by an agency, especially by newbie agencies that don't really know what they're doing and that have left a bad taste in the client's mouth at least a couple times over the course of their business career, especially if they're good potential clients, right? So that leaves a lot of businesses jaded, a little bit more skeptical, and it's a lot harder, in my opinion, to sign on clients than it is comparatively than maybe even from a year back or 2 years ago, right? So the result of that isn't that you can't sign on clients. It's just that you have to focus a little bit more on finding your edge to become relevant, okay? Because now that it's become increasingly important, now that so many people are there's been this huge influx of supply of the services, right? There's been a huge influx of agency owners. It's only logical. It's just basic economics that it's going to be harder and harder to get clients. And that also pushes price down, right? So if you don't have a clear and defined edge, you're not going to have a very easy time signing on clients for actually what you're truly worth, because they just see you as a clone of all these other newbie beginner agencies that don't really know what they're doing. Okay, so it's very important to find whatever it is, one or two things at least, that sets you apart from the competition. Now, for one-person agencies, that's also another issue that I discussed earlier. It's the constant uphill battle of fighting for free trials, begging for scraps, begging for business to build a portfolio or to get that one breakthrough client. And the last point is that there are many, many moving parts, and especially at scale, there start to be issues. Again, what worked at 10K per month might not work at 50K a month, right? So if you want to scale beyond that, you might want to start looking into, for example, building a client acquisition funnel. Maybe you want to have now a dedicated sales team. Maybe in the beginning you can get away with maybe stuff like cold messaging, cold emailing, which is a primary way of me and how I grow my agency. Maybe some of you might even want a cold call, which, by the way, I don't actually really recommend. Maybe a lot of you guys go to networking events and stuff like that. But my point is, you always have to know where your next client is coming from. And at different points of scale with your agency, how you get new clients is going to look very different. And also how you deliver your service, the number of team members you have, the way you guys communicate, that might look different as well. Okay. And that goes on to the trading section. Now that you guys have a little bit of a better understanding as to some of the pros and cons of the agency space, now I want to move into trading. And this is kind of where it starts to get fun, because this is where you can start to compare some of the pros and cons between the two. So with trading, very, very mystified sort of industry. Sometimes it's advertised as a very attractive, sexy way of making money, but really I'm just going to keep it real with you guys and show you my experiences with this space. So with trading, pros. It's not directly dependent on dealing with people. It's really only you in the charts unless you want to deal with people in this space. And that means if you're taking on clients or if you have students, etc. If you thrive in individual sports and pursuits, trading is going to be for you. Okay. So if you like the, alone time, right? If you're more introverted, I would say, if you like sharpening your sword over and over and just like a you versus you journey, instead of having to win the approval and win clients and deal with people directly, so to speak, or rely on getting sales to ultimately push your business forward, trading is one of those rare exceptions where you can be very, very successful without having to do any of those, especially if you trade your own money. Okay. You really do not have to answer to anyone. Second pro, many types of markets to trade in. So you can trade Forex, stocks, commodities. And let me slow down a little bit. Forex is different types of currencies. So for example, US dollar, Japanese yen, could be Canadian dollar against, New Zealand. So many different pairs you can trade. There's probably, 20, 30 different main pairs that I would recommend you guys focus on in the beginning. There's also stocks, which is just shares of companies, also commodities, so stuff like gold, silver, oil, etc. Bonds, EFTs, derivatives, which can include options, futures, etc. There's so many different markets, financial instruments you can trade. Next point is that if you trade Forex, you can also start with very little trading capital, okay? And for certain brokers, depending on which one you sign up with, you can actually start trading with as little as $50, okay? So that goes on to the next point, which is that there's very little to no overhead. Maybe you have to pay for 1 to 2 softwares max, and maybe you might want to invest in the course in the beginning. And then last pro, before we move on to this really important part down here, is that there's different types of trading for different personalities. So if you have less patience, for example, if you like to get in and out of things very quickly, if you're someone who has fast reflexes, you can think on your feet, and you don't mind the fast pace, then scalping is one way of trading. So that means you get in and out of trades typically within a few minutes to a few hours. If you're more so in the middle and you do have a little measure of patience, but you also don't want to wait it out for days or weeks on end, and you want to still make decisions fairly quickly, then day trading might be for you, which is holding trades for a few hours to a day. And the last thing is swing trading, right? So holding trades for a few days to weeks. Those are the three primary ways of trading, although there are more, like position trading, for example. but this is primarily how most beginning traders like to trade. These are some of the primary styles. Okay. Next point is that trading itself is a very relaxed process. This is actually, these two are probably the most important pros when it comes to trading. It's a very relaxed process. It should free up time in your schedule, not dominate your day, and you wait for the trades to come to you. So there's no pursuing clients. There's no actively going after sales or anything like that. Instead of going after things, you wait for them to come to you, and you only take what's given to you by the market. There's no forcing things here, which is kind of counterintuitive for a lot of entrepreneurs who think they need to be always pushing and constantly going after sales, etc. You wait for these trades to come to you, you confirm a setup, you determine your desired risk to reward, and then you sort of calculate in your head after multiple backtesting sessions what your win rate looks like. How likely are you to win or lose this trade? And then you place your trade, and then you wait. Okay? And when you get good, you can work for literally 15 to 30 minutes a day and make a doctor's salary, provided that you have enough capital and you're good enough at your craft. Next point is that there's unlimited scaling potential. So there's really no need for team members, clients, or even a business registration. Okay. If you make 15% monthly on your first $1,000, which would be a small profit of $150 approximately monthly, if you hold your psych constant, so if you don't let fear and greed and weird psychological issues get in the way, you can also make that same 15% monthly on a 10K or even 100K account. And that becomes relevant when you either start growing your capital and compounding after the first year or two, and that's really where the compounding effect takes effect, or you start getting outside money, right? So you start getting funding from other people, trading for other people's accounts. It's very easy to get that 100K account, and you can split up profits with whoever your clients are if you want to go down that route. Okay. And then the next point is that there's multiple streams of income with this as well. Okay. So besides the infinite scalability, besides not having to build a team and to sit in an office if you want to, besides not even having to deal with clients if you don't want to, you can also start multiple streams of income, right? So trading your own money, let's say you start off with 10K in capital and you get good. Let's say we're a little on the optimistic side. Let's say you make 15-20% a month. That's 1.52K, can probably cover your basic expenses while spending maybe like half an hour to an hour a day trading. Then maybe you start talking to your family or your friends, and maybe they want to put some capital in as well. Now all of a sudden your 10K goes to maybe 50K, right? Let's say you still make that, 15-20% a month. Now that 1.5 to 2K a month has gone to, what is that, on 50K, 15% is 7.5K, right? So you've pretty much already made a six-figure income by just getting a little additional capital, okay, from friends, family. And that doesn't really require any sort of licensing or anything like that as well, okay? Third thing you could do is trading Chatroom, right? If you get on social media and you find a lot of other traders who are first starting off, or they maybe could use some guidance. If you get good enough, you can start a chat room. You can give your advice. You can let them talk to each other about their upcoming trades, and pretty much a very passive way to make money. Same thing with signals, right? All you got to do is signals, and you can charge 20, 30, maybe even $100 a month for just adding people to, say, for example, a Telegram channel, and just calling out your trades live in that signal group, right? That's another way to make passive income. You can also run a video course or training program. You can do one-on-one coaching or group coaching. If you get good enough, and if you have some sort of long-term portfolio or track record, you might even want to get a job at a hedge fund, bank, or institution. I've seen that before, okay? Or if you want to, finally, you can start your own small hedge fund. You can trade outside money, and that obviously you do need to get a license for, but that's very, very far down the line. That just goes to show how unlimited your scaling potential is, not only vertically, but also horizontally in multiple streams of income. Now, let's talk about a few of the cons, and these are very relevant as well. But one thing that most people don't realize is that the market is truly and genuinely rigged against 90% plus of retail traders. Not in a very outright fashion or very obvious fashion, but it's very, very subtle. Okay, so the first thing is false educators, right? So it's very, very hard to find genuine information that'll actually help you if applied correctly. especially nowadays on social media where there are different types of network marketing groups and companies. There are different types of quote unquote Instagram educators, Instagram gurus that just flex demo profits. They'll never post a portfolio. They'll never post even a live sticker, bank statements, any of that. So you really got to do your due diligence when going into this space, because I will tell you up front that the educators in this space are far more likely than almost any other industry online to trick you and to not give you a proper education. Okay, so that's the first point I wanted to make as far as a market being rigged against you. Second thing is market manipulation on the part of big institutions, smart money, so to speak, big money. Okay, a lot of them have the power to not only move the market, but to also take opposite sides of trades from the 90% of people that generally lose money. So if you hold this statistic true, let's say, vast majority of traders actually lose money. All the big institutions have to do is just sort those people into a group and just take the opposite side of the trade. And we'll get into this probably in later videos where I talk about A book and B book, but essentially brokers separate good traders against the bad traders, and they just take the opposite sides of the bad traders' trades to make money. Okay, so market manipulation is the second thing. Its odds are very, very stacked against you unless you have the correct education from the correct person. Third thing is elusive advertising. So a lot of traders also come in and lose money because of false expectations. Okay, so if you're starting off and let's say you get recruited by like a network marketing company, you're going to expect trading to be a very, very easy thing. And in reality, you're not really even going to expect what I just told you pretty much. You're not going to expect that this is a very, very savage market to be in, and that you yourself have to be a savage in order to succeed in this. A lot of people go into this thinking it's easy money, that they can flip their first $100 to like 10K in 2 months. It's just unrealistic expectations, especially for you guys who are first starting off. So just keep in mind that there's a lot of elusive advertising. And again, brokers do this primarily, and they actually have what's known as IB agreements with these marketers because they want more and more people coming in using their brokerage, which they can profit off of. Okay. Next point. You will blow your account and fail if you're not a patient person, if you don't put in the work and back test your strategies relentlessly, if you're not in constant pursuit of your edge, again, and what makes you different from other traders, and if you do not employ proper risk management. This is probably the most common one, because most people just blow their accounts, not even necessarily because they don't have the right strategy to begin with, but a lot of them blow it earlier than that because they just don't employ proper risk management and they risk half their account on one trade. All that takes is 2 bad trades, 2 losing trades, and they lose all their trading capital. Okay, so proper risk management is key if you want to succeed in this space. Second to last point is that there's a high requirement for psychological fortitude and rational thinking. So if you're not the type of person to be able to put your emotions aside, then you're not really going to be successful. Okay, so it's a game of probability, and you have to be comfortable with taking losses, because no matter what your strategy is, you will not win 100% of the time. It's a game of probability. Even if you only have a 50% win rate or a 40% win rate, you only win 40-50% of the time. Okay, you can still be profitable if your risk to reward is high enough, right? So if your risk to reward is on average like 1 to 5, and that means that every single trade you can lose up to $100, but your potential for gain is always 500. Even if you only have a 30-40% win rate, you'll still be profitable in the end because your risk to reward is so much higher. So what's 1 loss? What's 2 losses? What's 3 losses, right? What's losing $300 in a row if you can make 500 back and be profitable 200 off of 1 single good trade? Okay, so that's another thing you got to take into account, is that if you're not comfortable with losing, you're probably not going to be a good fit. And also fear and greed as well. Obviously, this is what probably most people deal with as well, which is being overconfident in yourself when you're on a winning streak, and then if you're losing, making bad decisions because of straight up fear. Okay. Last point here is that you're slower to get to a 6-figure income in most cases unless you already have 5 to 6 figures in trading capital, or you can flip smaller accounts, but that also requires a high level of skill and confidence. And again, you're way more likely to blow your accounts if you flip. Okay, because common profits, even for someone who's really good and who's say top few percent in this space, which you can get to, by the way, if you get in contact with the right person who can teach you, even if you're in the top few percent, you're probably only going to make 10, maybe 20% gains monthly if you employ proper risk management and if you're more conservative, even if you're really good. Okay. So even if you have, say, like 20K to start off with in trading capital, saved up from your job, whatever, and that 20K, if you make 20% monthly off of that, that's only $4,000 a month. So that's halfway to the 6-figure mark. It's a good chunk of change. You could probably quit your job over it, but you're not going to get to that 6-figure mark unless you either compound your account or you save a lot more and you stay at your job. Or the third option is if you start handling outside money, or you start at least trading for friends and family. Okay. So that pretty much wraps it up. A lot of stuff that I went over today, but hopefully all this makes it helps making an easier decision for you, whether you're considering making the switch or if you're just deciding whether or not you should go into either one of these when you first start off on your entrepreneurial journey. Regardless, I'm going to have this doc in the description section of this video, so you guys can go ahead and download this after watching if you want to go over some more of these points without having to skip back through the video. So hopefully this was helpful. As I mentioned, very comprehensive, but this is pretty much all I gleaned from my experiences in both spaces. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to comment down below, or you can just straight up DM me on Instagram. And yeah, I'll leave you guys with this. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Leave a like, leave a comment, and I'll see you in the next one.